Construction workers have hit a roadblock during renovation of Green Bay West High School Sports Stadium. A cell phone tower is in the way of finishing the original plans for the remodeled grandstand. The renovations were initially expected to be finished ahead of the high school sports this fall. School officials saying the situation is out of their hands as the lessee is negotiating with the city of Green Bay. Officials will then bring a proposal back to the Green Bay School District about how to proceed. One official we spoke with today said the two options include building up to the cell tower and/or building around it. He says construction on the grandstand will have to be stopped so they don't interrupt with school sports.
I think playing it safe, making sure we can hold football games there with minimal impact is our priority. We will be able to get occupancy to that grandstand without that final section on. If we have to bring in temporary seating to accommodate, we're going to look at those options as well, depending on how many seats we're going to need for events.
He says the worst case scenario would be finishing by late spring, but are looking at all options to affect the least amount of students. Friends